They didn't come with warships. No beams of light tore open the sky. No ultimatums or alien languages garbled through the static of our satellites. They came like gods hiding in plain sight, cloaked in shimmering illusions, stepping off nothingness onto our streets as if they always belonged there. And we, in all our pride and power, saw them as benevolent overseers. They healed our sick, ended hunger, gifted us energy that bent the laws of physics. We called them the Caroleans. We didn't realize we were the pets. It was my brother who noticed first. Adam was 16, a half-rebel and half-savant with a voice that always sounded like he was either joking or on the edge of a revelation. He stared too long at the Caroleans' reflections and found they didn't quite match. He mimicked their smiles and watched them flinch. He once whispered a nonsense phrase to one and watched the creature drop its spoon and vanish into thin air. Of course, no one believed him. Not our parents, wrapped in the comfort of new luxuries. Not the teachers, who now quoted Carolean philosophy instead of Newton. Not even me, his older sister, Mira, who had once believed she'd grow up to be a theoretical physicist and now wore a neat white tunic and translated Carolean code for the Office of Integration. They're watching us like we're ants in a glass box, Adam had said one night, our shared bedroom dim and humming with soft blue light from the city. We think we're being uplifted, but we're being catalogued. I remember laughing, brushing his words off like crumbs. So what? If the ants suddenly got universal healthcare, would they complain? They would if the magnifying glass came next, he replied. A week later, Adam disappeared. The Caroleans said he had chosen to ascend, a term they used when people joined their research fleet. I asked for records. There were none. My parents, eerily calm, nodded and accepted it. I did not. I hacked the office's back-end systems and found patterns. Entire clusters of teenagers labeled as behavioral anomalies, then suddenly flagged as integrated and gone. No departure logs. No last messages. Just blank spaces. That's when I started looking harder. And once you start looking, you can't unsee it. Every Carolean enclave had central towers with floors that were off-limits. Every so-called gift they gave us required proximity, emitted fields that subtly changed our sleep patterns, our speech, even our dopamine responses. It was subtle, genius-level conditioning. Not slavery. Something more elegant. Domestication. And then came the final straw. Walking home from work, I passed through Unity Square, where a crowd gathered around a Carolean named Vorts. He stood tall, 7 feet of glistening blue, tendrils twitching softly as he communed with a group of schoolchildren. One girl, 8, maybe 9, asked him, "Do you have pets like us back home?" Vorth's smile widened. "We used to. But none as charming as humans." The crowd laughed. I did not. I saw the flicker of truth behind his crystalline eyes. That night, I cracked the last layer of their codebase. Buried beneath lines of living language, wrapped in quantum encryption only recently taught to us by the Caroleans, I found files. Files labeled with human names. Each had entries, behavior, response to stimuli, cognitive dissonance thresholds, suggested reproductive pairings, suggested obsolescence timelines. We weren't guests. We weren't allies. We were livestock with internet access. And that's when I found it. Adam's file. Marked as a deviation. Scheduled for dissonant reintegration. There were audio logs. Transcripts. He'd spoken in a tongue no one taught us. He'd said words that made the Caroleans recoil. One of them simply read, he remembered. I copied everything onto a black box drive, a tiny relic from Earth's pre-integration days, and disappeared into the unscanned sectors of the city. I wasn't alone. There were others. Humans like me who'd watched the shadows behind the light. We called ourselves the Echo. Because that's all we had of the truth, faint whispers bouncing off silence. We met in the basement of a forgotten museum, where dusty displays of pre-Carolean Earth sat in quiet protest. "They're experimenting on us," I said, uploading the files onto the communal drive. The others listened, pale and silent. Not just physically. They're mapping consciousness. Testing how far they can mold identity before we break. One man, a former neuroscientist, clenched his jaw. They're refining behavioral conditioning. We're not just pets. We're prototypes. A girl named Lena, barely 15, whispered, "What did your brother say?" The words? I shook my head. I don't know. But whatever it was, it scared them. The room was silent. Then Lena said something that chilled me more than any revelation. What if we all knew those words once? That night, we began to remember. We dug through old books, scrawled notes, forgotten recordings. A strange linguistic pattern kept appearing, phrases that seemed like gibberish but made something stir at the edge of the mind. We started practicing them in whispers, behind lead walls and static fields, where the Caroleans couldn't hear. The next day, one of us, Jonas, was caught on the street. A Carolean guard reached for him. Jonas shouted one of the phrases. The alien convulsed and crumbled into shimmering dust. Panic spread like fire through our network. We didn't have weapons. We had words. Words they feared. We had to find them all. They had buried our language, our truth, our power under layers of gifts and domestication. But the mind remembers what the soul cannot forget. And in the silence, our voices would rise. Because we were never meant to be silent. And now, one of us had spoken. We learned quickly that the Caroleans didn't just fear the words. They couldn't even process them. When Jonas uttered that strange phrase on the street, surveillance drones went dead in a 3-block radius. The Carolean who'd tried to restrain him collapsed in a heap of dissolving biolight, twitching tendrils folding in on themselves like burning plastic. By the time emergency response units arrived, Jonas had vanished into a sewer grate, and the Caroleans were broadcasting alerts on every channel. Behavioral breach detected. Containment protocols initiated. That same day, Unity Square went silent. The light towers dimmed to a deep navy hue. All learning hubs were shuttered. People were told to stay indoors under a new directive, protocol sheltering. The Caroleans claimed it was a safety precaution against a solar flare surge. But we knew better. We called it the dimming. While the rest of the world obeyed, we moved. Lena and I tracked down fragments of the lost phrases from deep net caches and broken linguistics archives hidden beneath firewalls older than the integration. She had a gift for pattern recognition. The phrases weren't just gibberish. They were phonetic activators, tied to ancient neural triggers, something deep in our genetic memory, like a song the soul remembered before the mind was born. We called the language Valari. We don't know where the name came from, only that it surfaced again and again in the margins of Carolean files, usually flagged with red-level containment protocols. But the Caroleans had another name for it. Pathogen of identity. Every time we uncovered a new Valari fragment, something happened. Our dreams changed. Memories sharpened. One man remembered a lullaby his grandmother used to hum in a dialect she never taught him. A woman began sketching complex geometric symbols she insisted she'd never seen before. The words weren't just sounds, they were catalysts. And the more we spoke them, the more the Caroleans reacted. They started hunting. First, they targeted our hideouts. Static-cloaked basements, forgotten subway terminals, quantum-nullified vans parked between cities. We lost 12 people in 3 days. Jonas was one of them. They found his signature on a heat trace after he recited the Valari phrase on a rooftop. They didn't kill him. They erased him. Not just physically, digitally, socially. His family woke up with no memory of him. His home repainted itself overnight. Not even his echo remained in the public record. We only knew because Lena kept a microphotonic imprint of every team member. She screamed when she saw Jonas's file blink into static. They're rewriting reality, she said, eyes wide with terror. That's what the towers are for. Not just communication. Cognitive dampening. Selective memory overriding. It made sense. If the words restored our identity, the Caroleans would counter it by erasing that identity entirely. Domestication wasn't just about conditioning. It was about removing anything that could inspire resistance. And yet, despite the fear, our movement grew. Whispers traveled faster than fiber. People heard the rumors, of words that shattered illusions, of rebels who could speak and make monsters vanish. Small bands of echoes formed worldwide. They reached out through encrypted pulse signals, carried across sound and vibration, encoded into rhythms and chants and forgotten nursery rhymes. We had no leader. No army. But we had something older. At the heart of the movement was the listeners. They were children, mostly under 10, who could hear Valari even before being taught. Something in them had never been fully overwritten. Lena called it primal latency. I just called it hope. We brought them together in the catacombs, a hidden school beneath the ruins of old Madrid, lined with decaying archives and faded murals. There, under hand-cranked lamps and soundproofed vaults, they chanted. Valari vibrated through stone like a living pulse. And that's when the Caroleans retaliated with something new. They unleashed the silencers. They looked human. Perfectly so. No glimmering skin or twitching tendrils. But their eyes were wrong, too still, too empty. They spoke in clipped tones and wore integration uniforms without names. They infiltrated resistance cells and then activated, wiping out entire groups in seconds. It wasn't weapons. It was proximity. One touch, and your mind went blank. They were failed humans. Domestication prototypes that didn't break properly, but broke enough to be repurposed. We had to adapt. Fast. Lena developed pulse filters, necklace-sized devices that emitted frequencies disrupting Carolean biotelemetry. We started using acoustic passwords in Valari to verify identity. No one entered a cell without reciting a specific phrase. And then, out of nowhere, we got a signal. It was garbled, fractured by interference. But unmistakably human. I speak. I remember. I see. 3 phrases. In Valari. We traced the signal to Sector 19, a reclamation zone in New Toronto. It was supposed to be uninhabitable after an atmospheric cleanse. We sent a scout team. They found a survivor. Adam. He was alive. Emaciated, pale, but very much human. He didn't speak much, not at first. His eyes flicked constantly, as if reading something behind our faces. But when he heard me, something lit up in him. They tried to overwrite me, he whispered. But I anchored myself with Valari. One phrase. I said it every second. Even when they cut my voice. I screamed it inside my mind. We embraced for a long time, and then he turned to the others. They fear us because Valari isn't ours. It's older. A weapon? Maybe. A language? Definitely. But also a map. A map out of the cage. His words sparked a shift in our entire resistance. The echo fractured into working cells, memory keepers, phrase seekers, listeners, map makers. And then, one night, Lena burst into the war room, breathless. I found it. The core phrase. The original seed. Hidden inside a Carolean core relay. I ran quantum decryption on it for days. It's a sentence. She played the recording. A single line in Valari that made every hair on my body rise. Ekran Tala Six Shira. Adam gasped. That's what I said before they took me. That's the phrase. That's what broke their hold. The words had meaning, but not a literal one. They resonated. Emotionally. Psychically. Like a tuning fork vibrating against the soul. The listeners began repeating it, over and over, and strange things happened. The Carolean towers flickered. The silencers withdrew. Dreams changed across cities. People woke up sobbing, laughing, screaming. Something was cracking in the world, a veneer tearing apart. We knew we couldn't contain it anymore. We had to spread it. So we hijacked the Carolean broadcast hub. It cost us dearly, 4 lives and a near-disintegration from a proximity mine. But we got in. Adam and I stood before the global transmitter. He took my hand. "Let's remind them." And he spoke the phrase. The world shook. Not literally, but in the data. Every Carolean communication node blinked red. Surveillance feeds turned to static. Skylights dimmed. Integration systems failed. Emergency drones crashed midair. Across the planet, humans stood still. And then, from every corner of Earth, voices began to echo back the phrase. Ekran Tala Six Shira. We didn't know exactly what it meant. But we knew what it did. It woke us up. And that was only the beginning. The world didn't end with the phrase. But something deeper shifted, something the Caroleans couldn't patch or reverse. For the first time in nearly a decade, we saw fear in them. The phrase spread like wildfire. Not through data. The Caroleans could block that. It moved through song, through whispers, through graffiti on broken walls and lullabies taught to toddlers in slums and high-rises alike. Valari took root in places tech couldn't reach, the human heart. And then came the purge. We called it the Grey March. Carolean enforcement units deployed across every major settlement, not as ambassadors but as jailers. They didn't kill. They assimilated, flooded homes with neurosonic pulses that rendered people docile, blank, forgetful. Families vanished into state centers for harmonic realignment. But it was too late. Something in us had shifted permanently. The words had rewired our resistance. Entire neighborhoods resisted by simply remembering. Small children stood in front of armored enforcers and shouted the phrases, collapsing the invaders into spasms of glitching light. That was when the Caroleans escalated. A monolith appeared in Earth's orbit. Blacker than void. Unscannable. It pulsed with a frequency not even Valari could disrupt. They called it the harmonizer. A global reset mechanism. They're going to wipe the slate, Adam said. Reset every brain on Earth to compliance levels. I felt the weight of those words settle into my bones. Everything we'd rebuilt, our language, our identity, our hope, it would be smoothed over like footprints in sand. We had less than a week. Adam, Lena, and I convened with the last core members of the Echo in an underground citadel we called the Vault, a former AI governance node in the ruins of Singapore. We were exhausted. Running low on resources. Half our network had gone dark. But we had one card left. The resonant child. Her name was Era. 8 years old. No recorded past. We found her wandering the ruins of Berlin, unharmed, whispering Valari fluently without ever being taught. When she spoke, even the hardened resistance fighters knelt in tears. She didn't know how she knew the words. But her voice changed the air around her. She's not reciting, Lena whispered once, watching her from a distance. She's remembering. If we could amplify Era's voice through the harmonizer's own network, maybe, just maybe, we could override it. But first, we had to reach it. The harmonizer was guarded by an orbital citadel called the Ascendant Crown. No human had ever set foot inside. Its defenses responded to intent, reading aggression before it could even be acted on. Suicide to attack. So we didn't attack. We surrendered. Adam and I approached the nearest Carolean enforcement center in full broadcast. Era walked beside us, her presence wrapped in a field dampener. I carried a device that mimicked full neural compliance. Lena orchestrated every detail. You're insane, one of the last Echo commanders told us. No, Adam said. We're bait. They took us quickly, teleporting us through a shimmering breach gate and directly into the crown. Inside, reality bent. The corridors pulsed with thought, literal thought, emotion turned into architecture. The walls responded to fear by becoming narrower. To anger by growing cold. I forced calmness into my breath. Adam kept his gaze steady. They didn't recognize Era. The dampener worked. They escorted us to the central core, a dome of silver liquid suspended in light. The harmonizer. Your species has outgrown its curiosity, said a Carolean overseer, shimmering into existence beside us. You must sleep now. I took Era's hand. She has something to say. They paused. Curious. Era stepped forward. The dampener deactivated. She began to speak. Not loudly. Not theatrically. Just a child's voice, soft and pure, reciting words that twisted the very air into resonance. The overseer stumbled. Alarms triggered. Walls recoiled. Era kept speaking. The harmonizer flickered. Elsewhere, Lena activated the bridge. We had a stolen fragment of Carolean architecture, a transmitter shard stolen from a dead overseer. She connected it to the vault's mainframe and synced it to the crown's internal channels. Era's voice surged through the entire citadel. And then, through every Carolean relay on Earth. Not just sound. Meaning. Memory. The language awoke minds that had been asleep for years. People in shelters began weeping, laughing. Some fell to their knees. Others ran into the streets screaming the phrases at the sky. The Caroleans convulsed. The overseer tried to move toward Era. Adam tackled him, shouting a Volari battle cry. The being disintegrated in a burst of unformed light. I took Era in my arms. We ran. Behind us, the harmonizer cracked. Not exploded, asterisk cracked star. Like a shell splitting to reveal something inside. Through the fractures came light. Pure and golden. But not Carolean. Volari. It was never their machine, Era whispered. They just turned it into a leash. The crown began to collapse. Lena triggered the breach exit. A shimmering gate opened to the vault. We leapt through, seconds before the entire structure folded inward on itself, vanishing into nothing. The sky changed. Across the globe, people saw the same vision, a spiral of golden symbols radiating outward from the stars, as if something ancient had awakened above us. The Caroleans tried to flee. Most didn't make it. Some begged for sanctuary. We gave them none. For years they treated us as pets. Now they knew we were the descendants of something they feared. Not because we were violent, but because we remembered. That night, under a sky pulsing with Volari light, humanity didn't just survive. We ascended. It didn't happen overnight. Even after the harmonizer cracked and the Carolean grip broke, it took weeks for the world to find its footing. The withdrawal was messy. Some Caroleans tried to bargain. Others fled in blind panic, abandoning cities mid-broadcast. A few chose to stay, quietly fading into the margins, their bodies no longer luminous, their arrogance dulled by something they could not name, awe. We let them go. Retribution wasn't the point. Reclamation was. The Echo disbanded. Not out of fear or defeat, but because there was no longer a need for secrecy. The world was awake. Humanity had remembered what it was. We gathered in the old cities first, those left untouched by the worst of integration. London, Kyoto, Addis Ababa, Bogota. New enclaves formed under the open sky, where memory wasn't stored in databases but passed by voice, story, and song. Volari became more than resistance, it became language again. A living, breathing thread tying us to a past that had never truly died. Adam and I stood on the cliffs of the old North Sea coast one morning, watching the sun rise over a world that felt, for the first time in years, ours. He was quiet, as always, but this time it was peace, not caution. What now? I asked. We rebuild. We remember. We teach. Behind us, Era played with a group of children, their laughter echoing against the wind. They weren't just reciting Volari phrases anymore. They were making new ones. Creating. Expanding the language. As if they understood that remembering was only the first step. The world had changed, was still changing. Some cities needed years to recover. Others, unburdened by integration, rose like beacons. Trade resumed, slowly and honestly. Technology wasn't thrown away, but rewired to serve rather than sedate. Neural maps were resynchronized without manipulation. Education returned to the hands of dreamers, not algorithms. The last of the silencers were deactivated. Without a central system feeding them commands, they stood idle, then collapsed like discarded mannequins. And the towers? We brought them down, not with bombs, but with chants. One phrase at a time. Era led the final chorus in Unity Square. It was the same place where Vorts once called us charming pets. There were no Caroleans left to watch. We never saw them again. But their ships still hung in distant orbits, silent and cold, reminders that even gods could lose their dominion when the truth was spoken clearly enough. Lena became a storyteller. She wandered from enclave to enclave, reciting the days of the dimming, the words that broke chains, and the name of every echo who had fallen. She said their names like spells, their lives like myth. Because they were. I never went back to the Office of Integration. That building, like so many others, was reclaimed by trees and wind. I became a teacher instead. My first class was 10 students. Then 20. Then 50. I taught them physics, yes. But I also taught them Valari. And I listened. Because the real miracle of humanity wasn't how loud we could speak. It was how deeply we could listen. One night, a young boy asked me why the Caroleans came at all. I looked at him for a long time before answering. Because they thought we were hollow. That they could fill us with obedience and erase the rest. Were we? No. We were full of something they couldn't comprehend. What? I smiled. We remembered. And that became the legacy. Not war. Not revenge. But memory. We built monuments not of stone, but of sound, places where songs were sung, where phrases were whispered at sunrise, where elders sat with children and passed on not commands but questions. What makes us human? Not our weapons. Not our machines. Our memory. Our defiance. Our language. And when others come, as they surely will, they may try again to override us. To make us forget. To tame and domesticate and mold. But we will remember this. That even in silence, a whisper can shatter empires. That even in darkness, memory burns brighter than stars. And that even when treated as pets, we never stopped being people. Because the first time one of us spoke, the universe had no choice but to listen.